All right. Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us for this part one of our AI Tools in Action webinar series, Configuring AI Workspaces for Grant Writing. My name is Denise Huschauer, and I am with Apricity Services, and I'm here today on behalf of the Association of Fundraising Professionals in Northeast Wisconsin chapter. So before we dive in, I just want to thank our co-sponsors along with AFP that have made this training possible. Amy Putzer with Oshkosh Area Community Foundation, Oshkosh Area United Way, and Andrea Peterson with NPLI Nonprofit Leadership Initiative. Collaborations like this allow us to offer professional development that strengthens nonprofit leaders and supports the important work happening across our region. So today's session will take us behind the scenes and see how AI tools can be set up to make grant research, writing, and editing more efficient. So we'll get a firsthand look at how custom ChatGPT chatbots and Google NotebookLM workspaces can be configured and used in real-world grant work. So leading us through this practical step-by-step session is Jae Williams, Operations Manager at More Fundraising Solutions. Jae specializes in designing internal systems that make grant processes faster, more organized, and more strategic through the use of AI. We will have time for questions at the end, so please drop them in the chat as they come up. And with that, we'll go ahead and get started, and welcome Jae.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Denise and Amy, and all of the sponsors and all the people behind the scenes that it took to put this together. And hello, everybody who joined us today. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedules and your busy days to be here. I know how full all of your calendars are and how you're all being pulled in so many different directions. So I don't take it lightly that you chose to spend a part of your day in this space with us. My hope is that this session will give you something useful, something thought-provoking, and maybe even something that you'll be excited to bring back to your team and work with. So a little bit about me. My name is Jae Williams. I'm the operations manager, and I manage all the internal systems at More Fundraising Solutions. So what we do is we help nonprofits make the most of their time and their talents. Over the last couple of years, I've been spending a lot of time exploring different AIs and integrating them into different processes that we work with on a day-to-day basis. So that includes building the ChatGPTs that we're going to go over today, and also exploring different AI tools that are integrated in other systems that we use, like the Google NotebookLM. That one is a little bit of a newer thing that we've been using just the last few months, and I'll kind of get into that. But there are other AIs that you've probably noticed integrated in different systems. If you use Adobe Acrobat, they have a wonderful AI that's integrated in their system that I would recommend checking out, as does Gemini for Google users. So there's tons of them out there. I could talk all day on each of those, but so much of this session is coming from real trial and error. We've tested out many different tools. We've been figuring out how best to use them in our work. And so basically, if you want to go ahead to the next slide. One thing about working in nonprofits, it can sometimes feel like you're just building the bike as you ride it. So the path ahead isn't always smooth, and the pieces don't always come together at once. More often than not, we are learning and adapting as we go, and that is okay, because this work has always been about more than just perfect plans. It's about showing up with creativity and resources, resourcefulness and heart. It's about finding your way forward, even when that road curves unexpectedly. And each adjustment, each small win, each lesson learned keeps the mission moving forward. So just bear that in mind as we go through this today. So this session is for you and what you will learn. Anybody who's excited to explore these tools, You're going to learn how to build a custom ChatGPT assistant, how to explore Google Notebook LM. We're going to do a live demo with that today. And then I'll just be kind of sprinkling in our observations and where each one really shines. And then right at the end, there is a link that you can have some takeaways if you want to use some practical prompt frameworks, and we'll kind of touch on that throughout as well. So you do not need a technical background to benefit from this session. There were just a couple of questions. Do you want to go back one more, Amy? You don't need a technical background to benefit from the session. There's a couple of questions that did come in with the registration. And one thing I want to point out is a lot of people are curious about the free options. And both of these systems do have free options. However, with the free option for ChatGPT, you can't create your own custom chatbot. That is a paid feature. So starting out right now, paid features are about $20 for the Plus plan. And then with the Teams plan, I think it's like $25 per team member that you have on the Teams plan. So those prices are subject to change at any time, but those have been what they've been for quite some time. So if you want to go to the next slide, Amy, thank you. So before we get into that, let's just pause and take a moment to set the stage before we dive into the tools themselves. So before we go any further, it's very helpful to remember that AI has kind of become a catch-all term. It can describe anything from the algorithms behind your emails, spam filters, to the predictive text on your phone. So the AI technology has been out there for some time. It's not entirely new, but what is new is just how much more accessible it's become to everyday folks like you and I in recent years. This means that more people are now able to tap into its potential. And that's a real game changer in the nonprofit space. It's kind of all everybody's been talking about lately. So in our conversation today, when we say AI, we're really talking about a specific type, and that's the large language models, or LLMs. So these are systems that are trained to understand and generate very human-like responses and text. But it is still you, the human being, that's driving everything behind it. It can't autonomously replace you and do your job for you, but it can definitely elevate different areas and make different things easier. So both ChatGPT and NotebookLM are Google NotebookLM are both powered by large language models, but if you're using them, you're going to notice ChatGPT is a lot more conversational, and Google LM is not. And we'll kind of see that through our demo today. All right, so if you just want to click through here, understanding data privacy with ChatGPT and NotebookLM. So for ChatGPT, when you're using the free or the standard paid version, just be aware that your data may be utilized to enhance their systems. So they're learning, the language model is learning from the inputs that people are putting in it. So that could be a concern if it's sensitive data that you're using. Now, there are ways to turn that off and disable that, which is what we do, and that's what we recommend. No matter what you're using, free or paid version. If you go with the enterprise version, it's a little pricier, but there's some extra layers of IT security behind it. So definitely worth checking out if you have, you know, a lot of need for privacy, like with health and things like that. For NotebookLM, as you can see, everything stays inside of your Google environment. So that operates a little bit differently. It ensures that everything that you upload remains private by default. So it doesn't train on your data or share it anywhere beyond your account. And it's really, really useful for any content where accuracy is crucial. So things like reports and outcome data or information that has to be cited. If you want to use only particular sources, you can narrow the sources that it's looking at versus just looking at the whole wide web. It's only going to look at the websites that you feed it or the documents that you upload. So, how do they behave? I would compare ChatGPT to the friendly intern. So imagine custom ChatGPT assistants as a supercharged intern. They have the capability to help you accomplish a lot, but just like any intern, they're going to require very clear, very specific directions and very close oversight. So you cannot assume that anything that they are going to produce is fully accurate. So you're going to want to double check and triple check your sources. So that's definitely something that if you've been listening to like the chatter around ChatGPT, they've had some issues with a recent update kind of caused some things to go a little wonky. And especially right now, we've noticed it in our work, and which is why we kind of pivoted to using other tools like Google Notebook for those parts to piece in the parts that really need to be accurate. So we kind of use ChatGPT as a thought partner to help us brainstorm and come up with large bodies of text, but then we use other systems to help make sure that every piece of it is accurate. So now you want to consider Google NotebookLM. That's like your personal librarian. So that works only with the materials that you provide it, and it helps you to find exactly what's inside of those sources. So you can rely on those answers because they're always grounded in your documents. And it might not be as fast or creative as the intern, but it does excel in precision and reliability and accuracy. So you might get less conversational outputs. There's certain nuances that it might not pick up on. It's just a little bit clunkier in how you interact with it. So to create your first GPT, and again, this is a paid feature. So if you don't have the means to if you explore that as an option for the paid feature, this section won't apply to you. However, the second part where we're talking about Google, that is basically wide open, and it gives you a lot more flexibility with the free option. So for the GPT, you're going to want to start by locating the logo in the upper left-hand corner of your screen. And if anybody wants to open up a new window and kind of follow along, if you have the paid version, you're welcome to do that now too. So once you've found the logo, you'll see a list beneath the logo, and this is your entry point to creating a custom assistant where it says GPTs. Next, it'll open up, you can click on the create button in the upper right-hand corner. There's a lot of stuff on this page that you're just gonna kind of ignore for now, but I'll pause here just to let you know, once you've played around with GPTs, it's exciting to go back and see what other people have already created. But in order to get something custom for your work, it really is best to create your own. Nobody else out there is going to have a GPT that knows your organization like a custom one can be trained to learn. So don't worry about missing out on exploring those. You can always go back and look at those later. So finally on this screen, this is where you can create. You can start creating. The tab on the left helps you get started quickly. It says create, and then you'll see one that's grayed out. It says configure. So on the create tab, it helps you get started quickly by just walking you through in a very conversational way the setup. So it's designed for anybody who wants to build an assistant without worrying about the technical details. You can just describe what you want in very plain language, and it'll help you fill in those fields automatically up until a certain point. So I recommend, if this is your first GPT, starting with that side, with that tab. And then if you want to get a little bit more into like the technical background of it, you can click on the configure side. So once you name it and describe it, it's going to give you a clear starting point. And it helps the system understand what it is that you're asking it to do. So now on the configure tab, that gives you full control over all the little details. So that's where you can write custom instructions. That's where you can upload files and adjust different capabilities like web search or data analysis. So most people, like I said, they start with create, kind of get a foundation built, and then to get more specific, click over on the configure side. On this part, just think of it like you're writing a job description for your assistant. So you're going to tell it what role it plays, what tasks it should be focusing on, what tone it should use when it's communicating. And the more specific that you are here, the better your results are going to be. This is the stage where you're going to turn a general assistant into something that's really customized, truly fits your organization. So this is a sample configuration that I kind of threw together. Like I said, we deal with several different clients. So each of our clients has their own GPTs that is trained on that organization's data and given it pre-approved documents to upload. And some of those documents are things like, you know, we like this phrasing and we don't like that phrasing. So things we want you to say and things we want you to stay away from, like kind of training it on the tone and the verbiages that it likes. So as we dive into configuring the instructions for the assistant, remember that these are foundational to it being successful. So if you're frustrated and it's not really responding the way you like, you might want to go back and give it better directions. Just revise your directions and see if that helps the outputs. So first you can consider you can consider the role. So let's say you're creating a fundraising and grant assistant for your organization. So this role should have all the context that comes into that. Next, you're going to focus on the tasks at hand. Your assistant should be able to draft a clear, persuasive proposal. You want it to write warm thank you letters. This is where you tell it what you're going to ask it to do. And then the tone and the style is kind of going into, you know, if you don't want to hear those beacon of hope and, you know, other top phrases that kind of give it away as AI, this is where you want to tell it that. So conversation starters, that's next. This is a very interesting part of the GPT that we didn't start using until after I had some training on prompting frameworks. But the conversation starters is basically going to create a little button in your GPT so that you can just press that button and it starts the conversation. So that's where we put in our prompts. And the number one prompt I'm sharing with you here, that's the number one prompt that we use, is context, task, success criteria, environment, and tone. So we basically, you press the button and it's going to pop up a bunch of questions trying to get you to describe a little bit more on each of those. And it helps you to build a better prompt so that way when you say, okay, execute and go, it's going to run and fetch information that's more in line with what you're actually wanting. Because the way human beings speak, even though you think you're being clear, you don't speak computer. So it just kind of bridges that language barrier and speaks in computer language more so. So the key is really just selecting the right framework for whatever task is at hand. So next, we've got knowledge library and capabilities. So the knowledge library lets you upload your reference materials like past proposals, grant proposals, annual reports, or program descriptions. So adding these is going to help your assistant really get into specifics. Again, there is a little bit of issues that a lot of people have been kind of grumbling about since this last update, with the knowledge libraries kind of not being as reliable as they once were. So my recommendation is to have your proposal that you're working on in a separate screen, and only just copy and paste chunks of it at a time as you need help. So don't just upload the whole thing. Just work on it piece by piece in a separate window. And that'll really help, because then it's not going to change the facts and figures that you've already verified. That was kind of one of the big issues that and I believe that ChatGPT is going to figure that out as they keep evolving and growing. But if you look it up online, there's some chatter about the knowledge library right now. But I do recommend starting small, using just key documents like um, program descriptions and annual reports. So it's a really great place to start. But keep it updated as well, because if you get a new annual report, so it's not citing incorrect statistics and things from last year. So kind of think of it like giving your assistant a stack of reference binders to study. So the more relevant and up to date that those files are, the better it's going to be able to perform. If you treat this like a living library and you're reviewing it regularly, adding new content regularly, that'll make a big deal, a big difference in um, how easy it is to use these tools going forward. Below that, you're going to see the capabilities. So the capabilities are optional tools that you can turn on and off. Web search is especially helpful if you need recent statistics, so it'll actually crawl and look in the web. If you have this button unchecked, it won't be connecting to the web. So it won't be as useful. You want to make sure that that button is checked. Canvas is the next option. Canvas allows you to write and edit text directly in your assistant shared workspace. This is, again, one that we have turned off recently, just because I found it easier to go back and forth, like I mentioned before, get back and forth between a document just to make sure it's not changing things as you go that you didn't want it changed. Image generation, that can create simple visuals for reports, campaigns, social posts, or even presentations like this one, because that's how I did all of the visuals. And then code interpreter, that's where you're going to upload like spreadsheets and Excel spreadsheets or Google Sheets. And it's capable of advanced data analysis. So it can analyze those things and read that language if you have that box checked. If you do not have that box checked, you're going to have a harder time if you try to upload those things and converse with it. So not every assistant that you build is going to need each of these tools. So you'll want to think of how are you going to use this GPT, and only check the boxes that need checking, because it'll kind of slow your tool down if you have everything checked that you don't need. All right, so this is probably one of the most important things, where to turn off data sharing. When I first started doing our chat GPTs for more fundraising solutions a couple of years ago, it was in a different location, and it was by each individual GPT. You had to decide if that one is going to have data sharing or not. They've moved that feature. So now you can find it in your personal settings for your account. I think that was probably a really good move, because a lot of people might not have known. If they did it once, they might not have known they need to do that every single time. So I think that that really helps organizations that are trying to be conscientious. And like I said, at More Fundraising Solutions, we don't share any of that data. All right, so now that your GPT is complete, you can share it. I would recommend using anyone with the link. You can publish it to the GPT store, which we ignored earlier. But that's kind of like an advanced level feature, and like I said, your GPT might not be as useful to the general population as it is for your own internal system. So this is the link that you'll share with your internal team. And that way, everybody who uses that link, even if they have their own free account, they can still use the GPT that you've created. And it's important to know that you don't have to share your logins or anything. They can sign up for their own free account. And if they have that link, they'll be utilizing the system that you started and that you've been feeding your data to. All right, so next up, we're gonna do a little demo and I'll show you around the Google Notebook LM. Do you want to go back to that screen? There's just a couple of things I want to go over still. All right, so for Google Notebook LM, it is, like I mentioned before, free to use with any Google account. It's going to give you full access to the core tools for uploading documents, summarizing content, and generating insights. So the main limitations between the free and the paid, the storage limitations, so you can create about 100 notebooks and 50 sources per notebook, which is, in my mind, way more than you even need. That's more than enough for most small teams, and it's more than what we even use. But we do have the paid account just because we use it for other features too. So organizations that want to use it more heavily, the paid version is called Notebook LM Plus, and that's going to come with Google One AI Premium. So it just increases your limit. There's a few extra features like response customization, and it supports team sharing. So again, for most nonprofits, the free version is a really good starting point to explore this tool before, deciding to upgrade and pay for anything. All right, so where are you going to find it? If you're already using Google Drive or Google Slides, you can find it in the upper right-hand corner right there with your existing tools. So you'll look for the 9-dot grid and just use the little scrolly bar to find it. It's towards the bottom, and it's kind of looks like a colorless rainbow. It's a very sad rainbow. All right, so on the next page here, once you're in, you can open up the tool. You'll see in the upper right-hand corner, there's a create button to start a new notebook. So this is where all of your notebooks are going to live. And I'm going to go ahead and switch screens so that I can share my screen and kind of go through the demo. So
While she's doing that, we will have time for Q&A at the end, so please feel free to use the chat function if you've got questions that you'd like addressed at the end.
we're going to have time for that. All right, can everybody see my screen now? Amy, can you see anything?
Yep, we're good.
Okay, good. All right, so this is just the introduction to Notebook LM that everybody sees when they go in it. I thought this was a really good place to start because it kind of shows a lot of tools already uploaded here on the side for sources. And then in the middle here is where you chat, and off to the right is the studio overview. So I'm hoping that you'll be able to hear Mm. I'm just going to start a brand new one here. So starting a brand new one looks like this. Are you still seeing the screen? Give me a thumbs up. Okay. So this is the very first thing that pops up when you hit that create button. It says you can add your sources by either uploading them, and you can, press this button and you can choose files, or you can get them down here from your Google Workspace if you have a Google Workspace connected. That's a really easy way to do it. Or you could go here where it says link, and you can put in whatever web link you would like. So if you found a report out there that you want to reference, if you have an entire website that you want to reference or a video, YouTube video, you can just share the link right there. And then there's also pasted text. So if you have another document that you've been working on, you just want to paste in a large chunk of text, you can do that here as well. So what I thought we could do is just upload some sources and kind of play around, and I can show you some of the coolest features live, because these are the features that kind of blew me away and why I was like, okay, we got to look into this. And like I said, we were already paying for an upgraded Google membership. So we wanted to make the most use out of every portion of that membership, which this was included. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit in the upper right hand corner here where it actually says discover sources. And then we can kind of just go along. So I'm going to say I'm an organization or a small nonprofit that helps local uninsured get access to health care. All right, so we're a small nonprofit that helps local uninsured residents to get health care. I could stop right here and you'll be amazed at what it responds with, and that's awesome. But like I was talking before about prompting, this is where if you take a little bit of extra time to be a little bit more specific, it's going to come back with way better results. So in this case, I'm going to say we are a small nonprofit in Northeast Wisconsin. And I'm going to say Winnebago County to be even more specific. And so now we're really going to narrow it down. I'm going to also ask it to help me find sources that would be useful for this organization. So one of the things that we cite pretty often in grant reports is statistics, local statistics and local demographics and who we serve. So this is a really good thing to ask it. I would like to find local that will help us show impact. Specifically, let's say I'm writing a grant for a specific program. Let's say we want to get some new equipment. We want to get a new ultrasound machine. And I want to specifically focus finding different reports and things that we can reference during this grant. So I'm going to say specifically data around maternity and pregnancy. And it's going to search the web because I have that little web checked. If I switched it to Google Drive, it would only look through the Google Drive. So I have folders where I find studies that people want us to reference specifically. And, our Google Drive is filled with those kinds of things. Now, this isn't quite as fast as ChatGPT, so you'll have to bear with me while it comes back with some sources. But it was pretty quick still. So we've got a Wisconsin public health profile for Winnebago County. It says 2017 local statistics on teen birth and prenatal care visits. We've got Wisconsin maternal and health profiles. We've got special order session. So we've got all kinds of things that may or may not be relevant to what we want to put into our data library. So I'm just going to uncheck some things because I don't think that we need the Zoom meeting for the county board. And maybe this 2023 document's a little too old. So I might want to go do a separate search and add in a particular website that I want to reference instead. But if you've already done that part where you've uploaded your sources and you're like, I just want to find some more, this is an excellent tool. It'll help you find studies that you never would even, you wouldn't have even thought to ask for them. So I'm going to import those 7 sources. And then you can move over here to the middle section where it says chat. And down at the bottom here, this is where you start typing. So what are the connections to early access to prenatal care? And some local data to back. And I probably misspelled something, but it can figure it out pretty well, even if you're not a Nazi or grammar, or excuse me, if you're not a grammar person, if you're not somebody who can really watch their spelling, it's going to figure it out anyways. So this is how the outputs look. So the outputs look very different than if you're used to using ChatGPT. These outputs are only looking at the sources we've given it. And that's also important because there's a lot of conflicting information on the World Wide Web about everything. So it's almost like information overload. If you want to just really make sure, you're not getting conflicting opinions, this is great for that. So the thing that I love and that we love about this is that the sources are in here easily identifiable. You just click on the source there and it pops up exactly where, off on the left, you can see exactly where it came from. So it's easy to copy and paste that. But also, when you're working on a grant draft, if there's multiple people in the organization working on a grant together collaboratively, it's really nice to be able to say, this statistic was sourced and have each one, accessible for the whole team, because you want to make sure that whatever you turn in is accurate. One thing that I should mention about this chat here is that you really don't see a lot of variation when you're asking it to when you're going back and forth in the chat. So this information is great, but let's say I wanted something a little bit more specific. You're going to see a huge chunk of text, just like it came back with this huge chunk of text. You're going to see a huge chunk of text and a lot of it's going to be repeated. So it's not as conversational and it's not as easy to get to the minutia of things. It's not as good of a thought partner, I would say, as ChatGPT, where you can kind of go back and forth with it. But again, if you're just kind of piecing in the data, it's perfect for that. So I hope that you guys can hear the audio. Please let me know if you can't, but this is one of the best features that I was super excited about, and it's the studio over here. So you can manipulate all the different data that's in here and just all these different ways. It's mind-blowing. So I'm going to click on the audio overview, and you can see down here it takes a few minutes to generate. So there's
Dave, while
also a
it's
couple.
generating, can I just interject a question that came through chat? Can you prompt
Absolutely.
it to filter through the repetitive information?
I haven't, honestly, found a really great way to do that. If I'm being honest, these tools, they have their limitations, and um, one is going to be really good at like one thing, and you kind of have to go back and forth. And like I said, we were really relying on ChatGPT for a very long time, and it wasn't until we started experiencing hiccups with it that we said, okay, we really need to, not put all our eggs in that one basket, and get used to these other systems a little bit more. So this is a system that we've been using now for just a few months, and it's greatly helped us with the problem we were having of, putting in information that was previously sourced. If you feed ChatGPT your whole document, it might change things. It might change things that you didn't want it to change. It might change the meaning of things. So that's why we stop putting the whole document in when we're doing that. We just piecemeal it in. But yeah, the chat, like, I think if you haven't really been used to using ChatGPT, then you'll be extremely impressed with this chat. But if you've used a little more advanced conversational type system, then this is kind of gonna leave you wanting. And again, this is all new technology. Everything changes so fast. Things that were true 6 months ago are no longer true. I used to never use the image generation stuff because it was junk. I couldn't generate images for nothing. Everything had 5 finger, nothing had 5 fingers, and it had weird glitches when you're generating humans. And now they've, in 6 months time, they've improved and improved and improved. And I use image generation all the time in our work now. So I hope that answers the question for that. Audio overview is still thinking. I wonder if it's because I'm sharing my screen. It's a little slow. But basically, I'll go over the other ones first here. So mind map. This is really interesting, again, like as a thought partner. If you're somebody who is a visual thinker and you guys are working on something, let's say like perfect example, program logic model. If you've ever put together a project program logic model, or any type of flow chart, the mind map is really helpful for that. And then reports, you can generate your own reports, or you can select from a ton of different options here. So you could do a briefing document where it's just an overview of all the sources that you fed it. You could do a study guide where it's got questions and quizzes. You could do a blog post. So again, this is just aggregating all of the data that's in there. So you want to make sure before you choose one of these reports that you go through your sources and unselect anything that you don't want selected before the report is generated. But grant proposal, strategic plan, obviously those are a lot more nuanced. So you might not be super impressed with the ones that come out, but it's a really great starting point. All right, so it looks like it generated.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today,
Can you hear
we're
the
opening
audio?
up, well, a pretty massive file on community well-being and public health infrastructure right here in Wisconsin. Our goal, we want to take two seemingly different sets of data and sort of crash them together. First, you've got these really local distress signals straight from residents in central Wisconsin. And second, the state's strategic, bigger picture public health and family support plans, specifically what's outlined in the maternal and child health priorities.
Exactly. It's like looking through a microscope versus a telescope, The local ADVOCP assessment that covers Fond du Lac, Green Lake, and Winnebago counties, they talked to 385 residents. It gives us this sharp, almost, painful view of where people feel that immediate economic pinch.
Okay, now I'm just telling you right now, that was the thing that really blew my mind when I heard it. That's all AI generated voices. It's not a real podcast, obviously, that happened in the time that we sat here and watched it load. And you might not use the entire thing, but you could absolutely go in there, find pieces that are relevant, and splice them together into something that works for your presentation or whatever it is that you're putting together. So all of these tools, again, are free to access for Google Notebook LM. I definitely recommend that everybody who's excited about this stuff, just explore, be creative. I would say one of the biggest things for us is making sure that you have some sort of guardrails and defined, things that you should and things that you shouldn't do with AI, kind of talked about as a team. But be really thoughtful in those discussions because, like I said, this is AI, but this is a closed environment that isn't being shared with anybody outside of who has access to your Google. So, just be mindful in how you're creating these policies, but your team and your volunteers that are excited about this stuff and want to explore it, they need to know how to color within the lines. So they need to know, what is okay, what isn't okay, and that'll give them, confidence as they go forward. And give yourself confidence too, because you'll kind of have an ethos to go back to and say, okay, does this seem like something that we should be doing or not? So, if you wanted to go back to the slides, Amy, just got some recap and then we can go through some Q&A.
Sure, I'll do that. And as I'm doing that, Deborah had a question. She noticed that it pulled 2022 needs assessment. Are you able to prompt it to ask for more recent or newer data?
Absolutely. So if you even want to go outside of this system in a new tab and just find it elsewhere, you're happy to, research outside of this system. And if you find a report that's more recent than that you would rather reference, you just have to uncheck it, delete it from your sources, and then click on the, add new sources button at the top and give it that website link that you do want to reference. So it's only referencing that going forward. But that's a really good question because, like I said, if you're using data that your organization, like your annual reports, you want to make sure that you're not referencing numbers and stats from a report that's 2 years old. You want to make sure that you pull those things out. Don't leave them in there. Make sure that you're going through your library. I would say at least twice a year, if not quarterly, and more often if you can stand to do it more often, awesome, more power to you. But I would say anytime you come out with a new annual report, if you want to put it in there, take the old one out. That would be my recommendation.
All right, Jay, just letting you know we're at about 10 minutes to go.
Okay.
Got a couple more questions, but I'll let you finish out this section.
If you just want to go back to the slides, I just got a couple of review slides, visuals.
Yep, you should be seeing them.
Oh, okay. So I guess I have something in my way.
Is everybody else seeing the slide deck? I just want to be sure.
All right, you can go to the next slide here. So just a quick recap. On the left is your sources panel where you build your library, upload your documents, only works with what you provided. Go ahead to the next section here. It's the chat. This is where your conversation is going to happen. You're going to place your questions and inquiries, and that's where those big chunky responses will show that have all the sources notated in it. And then the last one on the right is the studio. This is all the different things you can do with the studio. So you've got mind maps where you can visualize different connections and key themes. You've got briefing docs and study guides, audio overviews that you can listen to on the go. So let's say there was a 64-page report that came in and you don't have time to review it in its entirety, but you're going to be in the car for an hour. That might be a really nice thing to just do an audio overview summary of that report that you want to get key insights out of. And then visual or video summaries as well. Alrighty. And then, like Amy said, there's just a few more minutes left. So if there's a couple questions that I can answer, I'd be happy to do that.
So one question from Denise. If you don't use Google Workspace, does it still make sense to use NotebookLM, or will you get more out of it if you use Google Workspace?
It's really irrelevant if you use Google Workspace because you have access to it with a free Google account. But if you use Workspace, it's easier to get your drives connected, if that makes sense. So it's just a like, here, give it access to this whole Google Drive that has a whole cache of different information in it. But it absolutely is not a requirement that you be like a Google shop, because I know a lot of people are Microsoft. It's like either Google or Microsoft, and Microsoft has its own offerings. Microsoft Pilot, I've heard good things, but we're a Google shop, so we haven't really played around with that in our own work. But we have used different AI that's embedded in all the other systems that we use, like Monday.com has AI that's embedded in certain ways, certain columns, certain things you can do, like generate different documents and reports with AI. And then also Adobe Acrobat too, we've used, but hopefully that answers your question, Denise.
And then if I'm interpreting another question correctly, you had showed kind of the discover sources. Is there the ability to put in a specific URL if there's
Yep.
a particular report that you're aware of?
Absolutely. So that space on the left at the top, it's got a plus sign where you can add sources, and it'll ask you what type of source it is. Is it a web link? If you're using the free version, you're limited to how many sources you can add, up to 50. But like I said, we've never even come close to hitting that mark. And we have the paid version where we have extra that we don't even need or use. But I think if you are a Google shop or you have your Google Drive connected, that's where the extra storage really would come into play.
Question from Hillary. How does Notebook do with creating codes to use for Google Scripts?
I have done extremely limited amount of coding, and all my experience with coding has been since I learned how to use ChatGPT. I am not a technical expert by any means. I have no IT background. I just consider myself somebody who's very inquisitive about AI. So I've constantly got my ear to the ground. I'm constantly reading articles and just interested in it. But as far as like coding goes, I don't believe that Google NotebookLM is going to be the right tool to help you with that. But I would recommend ChatGPT because, like I mentioned before, the recent update that kind of made things go all wonky in the ways that we were using it was actually an update to help with the coding side of things for people who are using it in that way. And the chatter on that has been mostly positive. So if you're looking for, like a thought partner in and going down exploring coding, I went from a level 0 to a level 0.2. So I'm still not a coder at all by any means, but I was able to do some light coding to do things on the back end. Like there was an integration in Monday that we couldn't figure out through their system. So we had to do a custom integration where when people are responding to a survey that's in Google, we wanted those results to populate in a Monday board that we had, a Monday spreadsheet that we have. So we had to do some back end coding with that. And it only took me about 2 hours to figure it out with that tool.
Another question from Nancy. Are there legal requirements for disclosing when AI generated material has been used?
In certain settings, you might see that, I guess, if you had like a legal responsibility to share it. But really, AI generated content is really hard to distinguish from content. It's almost like, did you use spell check when you were writing that document? Did you use Grammarly? Grammarly is kind of a step in the AI direction from spell check. So if you've been using Grammarly for years to help with your, the way you speak in reports, the way you speak in written language, then you're already kind of halfway there to doing that. So it's like, where do you draw the line? Anything that we produce is never 100% AI because it would look like garbage if you did, and everybody could tell. It'd be littered with M dashes. So really it's a tool that you have to kind of go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth to get it just right. But like the presentation, I used AI for everything that I did today, but that doesn't mean I just like asked it to do a report for me and it just spit everything out. Like it still took hours and hours of back and forth, but I'm not a graphic designer. I couldn't have created and generated those images just from what I made up in my mind if I hadn't had the tool of AI to lean on for that. But there are people who learn that skill and get paid very well to do graphic design. So
Denise, you want to wrap us up?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you again for joining us today, and thank you, Jay, for everything that you have shared with the group today. We will be sharing the recording afterwards, so that way you guys have access to this information again to go over it, and hopefully you're leaving with some new ideas for how AI can simplify and strengthen your grant work across your organization. So just another thanks to our co-sponsors, so Oshkosh Area Community Foundation, Association of Fundraising Professionals, Northeast Wisconsin Chapter, Oshkosh Area United Way, and the Nonprofit Leadership Initiative for making this series possible. So we hope that you're going to join us in November for part 2, Smarter Grant Writing with AI, on November 11th with Noelle Fenwick, who will share real-world examples of how to apply these tools to actual grant writing and reporting. So thank you all again, and I hope you have a great day.
thank you.